one cruise ship causes as much carbon emissions as the entire continent of Europe and its cars, okay? That's insane. All right. So let's listen to one of the vlogbrothers talk about this bill. I want to hear what their takes are.
Joe Biden is probably going to sign the largest single piece of climate change legislation any country on our planet has ever enacted, but everything I have read, and I have read a lot, is frustratingly thin on detail. And as I tried to do the research myself on that, I discovered why. I've been going over nonpartisan analyses, congressional budget office reports, talking to the people who wrote those reports, talking to the administrator of the EPA, even in some cases, reading the actual text of the 700-page bill, and what I have found has been a surprise, but also a bit of a delight. So let's start at the beginning.
I also think it's pretty poetic that Joe Brandon gave Joe Manchin the pen he signed the bill with, as though like Joe Manchin is the climate hero in this circumstance. Wait, what? What's going on? Did it actually F? Not on my end. My end, it's fine. Hello?
Around 4 billion years ago, something started to be alive on Earth, and ever since then, that life has had a profound effect on the planet. Photosynthesizers used sunlight to break up carbon dioxide, build their bodies out of the carbon, and release the oxygen. That oxygen made all kinds of interesting, weird things happen, including at one point killing almost everything. So no, life creating atmospheric change that has a profound negative impact on life, not actually new. Over time,
bro, I love cowboy shirts. I hate to say this because I know like people clown on my fits all the time, and I'm trying to change that, okay? A lot of influencers are getting paid big money to only tout positives for the IRA. Wait, really? I doubt that he's one of those people. I mean, I'd be surprised because like it seems like this is a pet project for him. This is something that he like legitimately, genuinely cares about. But anyway, listen. Not my Hank. Yeah, exactly. Not my vlog brother, dude. I think this is like a 100% free moment for him. He is pretty libbed up. So. Yeah, I was going to say, unrelated to the video at hand, we are going to do that. We are going to cover the video, obviously, but unrelated to the video at hand, I just have to point out really quickly that this shirt is the worst shirt I've ever seen. Oh my Lord. And I love Western shirts. This is disastrous, okay? Why is Hank Green wearing the new generation Spider-Man Miles Morales outfit of Western shirts, okay? This literally looks like a Western shirt that was made exclusive to promote the upcoming Miles Morales Spider-Man movie, okay? No wonder Hank Green's not a friend of the show. No. But he looks just like you, dog. Yeah, I know. We went from, I was thinking about this the other night. We went from like people saying that I had good style to people just like ultimately clowning on my drip because drip is very arbitrary. But also, it is something that you need to stay on all the time. And for the past, like, since 2019, especially with COVID and whatnot, I just, like, kind of gave up. I always loved fashion. I never really had a lot of money to be able to do more fashionable shit. I was a Maxinista for most of my life. And, I'm gonna start. Who said you dress well? Shut the fuck up. I'm going to I'm gonna do a better effort on getting better drip in the future. Is he suggesting that Miles is the worst Spider-Man, or does he like the shirt? Lol. No. I like Miles Morales. I have no problem with Miles Morales. I just think that this shirt is ugly, and it looks like new gen Spider-Man pattern.
Impact on life, not actually new. Over time, life kept shoving energy into carbon-containing molecules, and then after the life died, those molecules would break down and the energy would be re-released, but sometimes the molecules of the dead thing would stay trapped, and they wouldn't break down, and they would get stuck in the earth, where they'd heat up and get squished and become coal or oil or natural gas. All of that energy, emitted by the sun, grabbed by life, and then stored by the earth, waiting there to power your car or your refrigerator or your Microsoft Zoom. That energy is what has powered so much of our modern lives. But as we have released that energy to do things with, we have also released the original molecules that it was stored inside of. Those complicated carbon molecules get broken down and carbon dioxide gets released. It is a molecule that is opaque to a lot of infrared radiation, a gas that makes our atmosphere less clear to heat. And so heat that would otherwise escape no longer is. There is more energy in the atmosphere, and it's changing weather patterns, increasing droughts and fires and storms and heat waves. But unfortunately, we also really need need all of that energy to prevent people from dying in heat waves, to make the food that people eat, to move it around, and to power the plane that takes me to visit my brother. We can't just turn the power plants off. People would start dying very quickly, and they wouldn't stop for a really, really long time. It's messy and it's complex, and like those first cyanobacteria, people started to wonder if we weren't gonna just ruin it for ourselves. But we are smarter than them, and we are more capable of passing broad-based industrial policy with a focus on clean energy than they are. Barely. Just barely. And that brings us up to now.
I'm so excited, and I just can't.
Oh, fuck. Now
In 2005, a couple of years before this YouTube channel began, the US hit peak carbon emissions of 7 billion tons per year. At the time, that problem looked pretty insurmountable. This is Jesse Jenkins, one of the world's leading experts on modeling decarbonization efforts, talking about those dark years.
At the time, if you could get a wind farm that costs less than $100 a megawatt hour, which is like triple the normal electricity rate, that was a great deal.
Yeah.
And solar was 10 times the cost of normal power from a gas plant or something. But over the last decade, due to supportive policies in the US, but also abroad in China and Germany and Japan and elsewhere, we've taken these, what we used to call expensive alternative energy technologies that at the time people were worried we couldn't get 5 or 10 or 15% of our electricity from without blowing up the grid. Right. And now they are cheap trillion-dollar mainstream technologies that are scaling rapidly and are powering, in the case of some parts of the country.
Do you know half of all historical human carbon emissions were emitted since you were born? Sigh. I mean, that's literally the least shocking thing I've ever heard in my entire life, especially considering the reality that, like, as technological achievements happen at an exponential rate and more people have access to said technological achievements as it becomes cheaper and cheaper to both produce and also to consume, yes, we are going to end up, emitting way more carbon emissions than ever before. That's why, like, the average American's fridge in one day is like, or the average American's fridge annually is like, has the carbon footprint of an entire nation if it's an underdeveloped nation.
Country the majority of our electricity on certain days.
I am in what seems to be a weird situation of being more optimistic now than I was 20 years ago, because in that time I have seen a lot of change. Since this YouTube channel began, we have dropped from 7 billion tons to 5 billion tons emitted per year in the US. In the next 15 years, according to Jesse's models, which admittedly are trying to predict the future, we will probably get down to 3.5 billion tons, 50% lower than our peak. This week I was able to talk to Michael Regan, the head of the EPA, and he also talked about this optimism.
Even when I talk to past EPA administrators, the role technology plays in the solutions that we're seeking, the quickness of innovation and the evolution of business models, matching with technology and science and data, we can move much faster than we've ever moved before.
We are aiming for net zero carbon emissions in America by 2050. And this is the first time in my life that I have felt like that might be possible. We have never undergone a shift in energy use that is anything like this. Maybe the original electrification of the country, but we're gonna have to make this shift a lot faster than we made that shift. However complex you think this is, it's more complex than that. This is the case even for experts. Like, we only ever get to see our own little corner of what's going on. This is a big problem that no one person understands all of. But in this video, you're gonna go from understanding more than like 80 or 90% of people to understanding this more than 99% of people. And it's only gonna take you like 15 minutes. So let's do this.
What's this? Okay, I like it. Picasso.
This bill basically has 3 big goals, and I don't see them being talked about. So here's the framework with which to understand this. 1, we are trying to decrease the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases we emit in the atmosphere. 2, we are trying to make the impacts of climate change and pollution and also this energy shift less impactful on people, or ideally a good thing for people so that they like it. Particularly, we would like to decrease the impacts on the most disadvantaged people. And 3rd, and this is important to understand anything that's going on here, this is a bill that is trying to make the United States of America into an industrial center of the clean technology revolution. Now, there are some other smaller things in the bill that don't fit into any of these categories. We'll talk about them in the future, but that's the 3 big things. Oh, look, each one of these blocks is $1 billion, and there are 369 of them, and we're gonna start filling them up. First, we want to drive down the cost of installing renewable energy projects. That's wind, solar, and grid-scale batteries. That's gonna lower people's electricity bills, and it's also gonna make it so that when you plug in your electric car in the year 2027, 7, we'll get to that, the power turning your wheels is going to produce less carbon dioxide. And wow, we have filled up a lot of our billions. All this money is here to incentivize power producers to use more wind, solar, and grid-scale batteries. That's gonna
One of the things I've heard, by the way, and I can't believe I'm saying this, one of the things I've heard a lot from like leftists is just like a new wave, is that America's green energy initiatives are actually like anti third world because it's like harming like African production and like AFRICOM and like Africa is resource rich, and that there's two elements of tackling from the left that are attacking like third worldists that are attacking green energy initiatives in the Western world. One is that this will create more opportunities for rampant colonial expansion, imperialist expansion, specifically like in places like Bolivia that are resource rich in lithium, which is profoundly important for battery technology. It's an important resource for batteries, and then Africa for oil and gas. Which, I mean, for the record, I don't have I don't think that is an adequate counter to a problem that will end up helping everyone overall.
reduce the amount of
Hank Green is also so aggressively anti-China that he forgets who actually leads in green energy and who's last, posturing, fucking libs. I mean, yes, he alludes to it a little bit. He alludes to this a little bit, where he says America will become a global leader in renewable energy initiatives once again with this bill, and that is because Russia and China have made a lot of efforts, a lot more efforts than America has in the past couple of decades in renewable energy initiatives. That is, of course, not factoring in a lot of the European countries and their efforts in switching over to renewable energy, but we don't care about that because Europe is an extension of America, whereas Russia and China are adversaries. So, but yes, the United States is mostly China, but no, Russia has focused on. I mean, I remember reading like I think it was, I don't know if it was a paper from the CIA or a paper commissioned by the CIA through a think tank about like the global efforts being made by America's foreign adversaries in regards to renewable energies. This was like a couple years ago, but especially China.
CO2 being released into the atmosphere, but also it does the second thing. It does that by decreasing electricity bills, having minimum wage requirements and apprenticeship requirements. And it does the third thing by requiring that a lot of the stuff that is going into these projects, solar panels, batteries, wind turbines, are made in America, and the components are either from America or from our free trade allies. If you've ever played Tony Hawk Pro Skater, you know how like when you do like more than one trick in a row, you can get a multiplier. It's like that. If you do any of these individual things, you get some stuff, but there's multipliers every time you do more. But Hank, I hear you saying, we don't make a lot of solar panels or wind turbines or batteries in America right now. How are we going to be able to source those from America? Oh, don't worry about that. Boom. It's the second biggest thing in the bill, the manufacturing tax credits. Not only do the people buying the thing get the tax credit, but so do the people making the things. We're building out a whole industry here. $37 billion is expected to go toward helping companies make solar panels and battery components and wind turbines and et cetera, et cetera. And they've got to be made in the US, and they got to hit those wage and apprenticeship requirements. But Hank, you continue to be concerned. Solar power and wind power, they're intermittent. You can't expect them to be on all the time, and those batteries, they're going to handle some of that shifting, but not all of it. That is right. We need firm power that you can turn on whenever you need it. And the biggest piece of cash in this bill that goes toward that goes toward existing nuclear power plants, helping them stay open and keep operating. Existing carbon-free electricity with tax breaks, but only if you meet wage and apprenticeship requirements. Probably just expect that everything you hear about is going to have wage and apprenticeship requirements because this bill has to be good for people, and also there need to be people to work on these things, so you need to be training people and you need to be paying them well. Now, also focused on firm power are smaller investments in potential future technologies like advanced nuclear power, advanced geothermal, and advanced biofuels. We don't know which of those things is going to be the best or most impactful, but all of them could end up being important players in carbon-free firm power. All right, so now this hypothetical person who's basically constructing the bill with me is concerned that we're giving a lot of money to power plants, not a lot of money to people. Well, how about $22 billion for you, and another $14 billion after that, and then $12 billion after that? The $22 billion goes to help people upgrade their appliances in their homes, like water heaters, furnaces, stoves, and even just their electrical boxes to handle all of that new electricity. Because guess what? You might not have noticed, your house currently has an exhaust pipe. It is extremely likely that you have power coming into your house in two ways. The electricity that powers the lights and the microwave and your Microsoft Zune, and then there's the gas power that powers your furnace and your water heater and maybe your stovetop, possibly even your clothes dryer. All of that means that your house chugs out CO2, and there isn't an easy way to clean that up without replacing those methane burning appliances with appliances that run on electricity. And if you can't do that, not only are you just releasing a lot of carbon dioxide, also you're reliant on a single source of fuel for your heat and your hot water, and that fuel price can fluctuate a lot, while electricity costs.
I feel like this just creates my immediate skepticism on the tax credit side of things is that like this just beefs up an entire secondary industry that will exclusively focus on carbon capture technology, which isn't necessarily the worst thing. My fear is that this basically just creates not subsidies but tax credits for again the endless private-public partnership that we have in this country, where some really inadequate private corporations are going to come in and be like, oh yeah, here, if you want to take advantage of like the renewable energy tax credits that are coming your way, here we'll like upgrade your system, and then they're going to do a shit job and only focus on getting making as much money, farming as much money off the government as possible. This is the only way to really do it when you choose to operate within a capitalist mindset. I know, but like, can do more than that. You know what I mean? It's like, if we're talking about a carrot and a stick, I think we need more sticks. And if we're talking about carrots, I think we need like the government to provide the carrot rather than, build out a fucking entire industry of regulators, and also build out an entire group of people on the manufacturing side that are working to do this. You did pre-watch? What? No, I'm not. I did not. What? How could I have pre-watched? Didn't this just come out? Carbon capture is a small part of the bill. Unfortunately, carbon removal will be necessary because we are at 420 ppm and we need to be at 350. So we need to do research on the best, cheapest ways to remove. The other side of the bill that I'm sure he's going to get to, there's no way he will not get to it, is the handouts specifically to the oil and gas industry, but we'll see.
Don't fluctuate as much. And those fluctuations hit low-income people extra hard because fuel costs and energy costs are a higher portion of what they spend their money on. So this $22 billion goes toward helping people buy, and in some cases, outright covering the entire cost of appliances that electrify these previously gas-powered things. Heat pumps to heat and cool homes using electricity, heat pump water heaters, electric or induction stoves.
For the record, you guys know what my attitude on this is. Like, if I had a fucking magic wand that was like somewhat limited in its capacity, and I had a one-trick pony or like a one-trick solution to it, I would immediately nationalize the entire extraction industry, all the way from fucking forestries, forestry services, all the way down to fucking oil and gas, and then use every ounce of profit that comes from said industry, dump it into renewable energy initiatives, like slowly but surely shifting away. If I had that, one blammo stick, one blammo opportunity, that's what I would do. That's the right thing to do. That's the best thing to do. And stop operating at a for-profit, stop operating extraction in a for-profit basis. Because when you have a incentive, when you have a profit margin increasing incentive, then you're always going to focus on things that end up harming the environment, devastate the environment, greatly. That's not nearly enough, though. Slowly but surely is not going to cut it. What do you mean, bro? That's like infinitely, that is like an infinitely better solution than this, which is not going to happen anyway. Oh, you're for nationalizing the extraction industry, but not down for forced monogamy / redistribution of women to men? Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Even though I do make the false promise that a subscription will get you a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it won't, but it will help you avoid the top of the hour ad break, which is coming right now because I forgot to run it earlier. Here's the 1 minute ad break now. Let's continue.
Tops. Just buying one of these appliances saves people money in the long term already, but folks usually can't afford the upfront costs of that, especially doing all of these things at the same time. Well, no longer. The next $14 billion are to help people and property owners make their buildings more efficient, and these last $12 billion are for, you guessed it, electric vehicle tax credits that you probably can't use. I know what you're thinking. All that sounded so great until that last part. Why can I not use my electric vehicle tax credit? Because of the third thing. These cars also have manufacturing requirements. And when this bill goes into effect, the number of cars that will qualify for that is quite small, and they will all be sold very quickly. Now, there were already tax credits on electric vehicles, but those credits only apply for the first 200,000 vehicles from each manufacturer, and many manufacturers, GM, Tesla, etc., have already burned through all of those. This extends those indefinitely for the next 10 years, but only if they meet the requirements. Because again, the bill is about all three things. Other countries have had this kind of industrial policy for decades, and that has allowed them to build up their industries producing these things. And the people who crafted this bill, for better or worse, want the
Tax credits are not pointless. It's the only thing you can do if you want to, as the chatter also correctly pointed out. If you want to operate within a capitalist framework, that's the only thing you can do. Like, it sucks, but that's the only thing you can do. Subsidies is another thing you can do, which is kind of like tax credits. But, you know, it's just tax credit works like a subsidy for each person, right? Yeah, kind of.
US to have that kind of industrial policy. It now looks like we are more than halfway through the things that this bill does, but we are not. Down here, things start to get much more dense, and then you realize that there are actually hundreds of ways that this bill spends money, and each one of them does a different thing for different people in different places. Like, Hank, what about the carbon impact of forest fires? Yeah, that is in there. How about decarbonizing airplane fuels? Yeah, early stages in trying to get that done, that's in there. Converting garbage trucks and city buses to electric, it definitely does that. Tax incentives for existing power plants to capture their emissions, yeah, $3 billion for that. Electrifying most of the postal service fleet, another $3 billion for that. Reconnecting communities that were divided by the interstate highway system, yes, $3 billion for that too. Helping farmers figure out systems for sequestering carbon in their fields, sure. Cleaning up and electrifying port infrastructure, definitely that. Early market creation for low carbon building materials, also in there. New transmission lines, because all of this electrification is going to require a more robust grid, yeah, that too. Charging stations for EVs, got that as well. Grants for tribes to invest in clean energy, got that too. Buying debt from rural power co-ops if they promise to shut down their carbon emitting power plants and giving them money to build new infrastructure, that's in there too. There's a lot of things that are trying to do really specific individual things, but there's also big hunks in here that aren't prescriptive. It's money for communities to do things that they want to do to decrease their impacts. Here's EPA Administrator Michael Regan again talking about that.
A lot of these grant dollars that are in the Act, we're able to give those to community groups who are partnering with universities and incubation centers. The matching dollars and the low interest loans are available to people who have never been at the table. If we get these universities.
I love how electric vehicles have higher funding than public transit. Yeah, that is an America moment. The irony is, like, if you want to fucking wipe out carbon emissions, which like 1/3 of it comes from, you know, personal usage of your daily car, like your personal daily usage of your vehicle. The greatest way to do that is by beefing up the public infrastructure in an effort to have a more robust public transit everywhere, right? But of course, because we're so Ameribrained and like the oil and gas industry alongside the car manufacturers in this country have created this attitude, tied it to like American exceptionalism and American individualism, like that car ownership is the primary goal of maintaining your independence. That's outside of the bounds of reason for some reason. We're not even thinking about that as a way to deal with it. I live in the mountains, I'll stick with cars, thanks. Man, shut the fuck up. I live in the mountains, I stick with cars, thanks. First of all, if you live in the mountains, we're not even talking about you, okay? So don't do that me bullshit. And secondly, public transit, adequate public transit means some form of public transit coming to you as well, okay? Stop fucking reinforcing the idea that like you have to be a car cuck. Mountain boy. Motherfuckers be like, I live in the mountains, you know, I'll stick with my individual vehicle. It's like, bro, okay, well, you know, that kind of attitude is the exact same attitude as to why if we privatize the fucking U.S. Postal Service or the U.S. Postal Service operated as a for-profit institution, you would not get any of your fucking mail. So shut up.
And these young adults these incubation centers, really tackling these issues with community groups on the ground, these solutions can look 1,001 different ways. And we have to feed all of these solutions to see which ones work for each individual community. We don't have to accept the notion that there's a one size.
Also, also using or beefing up public transit. Okay, like actually building an adequate public transport structure, infrastructure spending on that regard does not mean that we're gonna come and like seize your vehicle at gunpoint. Okay, you can still have your car, dummy. Except most people would probably rather take a fucking train, which in some instances could be fucking faster than your regular commute, cutting down on your regular commute, allowing you to have some free time to yourself while you're doing that additional unpaid hour of driving back and forth to your job that your job's not paying for, right? And it will lower the amount of cars on the road. That is the only successful method. More lanes on a highway will never lower traffic density, okay? The only way to lower traffic density is with public transit. That's it. There's no other way to do it. And yet, for some weird reason, people constantly act like that's not the case, and we shouldn't do that. And that if you do have public transit, that means like you're gonna have a homeless person stab you in the gut while you're there, like while you're on the ride there. You know what I mean? No, lanes don't help. Trains do.
Fit all. It can look 1,001 different ways.
But Hank, this hypothetical person who is walking me through this entire bill, is now asking me, why are we doing all of these individual things instead of just doing the one thing? If you did one thing, it would do everything. And that's just to make fossil fuels more expensive.
Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
A few years ago, an ex-lobbyist from Exxon.
Oh, let's go.
was caught on video.
Beat his ass in the QRTs, Hank.
Saying this.
Nobody is going to propose a tax on all Americans. And the cynical side of me says, yeah, we kind of know that, but it gives us a talking point that we can say, well, what is ExxonMobil?
You're forgetting to address that the U.S. is fucking huge. You drive 3 hours there and you're still in the same state. You drive 3 hours in Europe and you're in a whole other country. Yeah, it's so crazy. It's wonderful that like Europe doesn't have, Europe-wide railway systems. So that's why famously you can't take a fucking train from England to anywhere because, that's an island, right? Also, another country that's not as big as the United States, obviously, is China. Another country famously that doesn't have any adequate public transit. It's really cool. Thank you. Thank you for bringing in your Americentric brain into the conversation. And instead of very quickly and easily looking up if there is like, countrywide or continent-wide fucking railways in Europe or even another country like China and its railway system, instead of doing that, you just decided to say, well, America's really big, brother. Yeah, I know America's really big. No, Hasan, I need these cliches so I don't have to think about car-centric culture. It's one of the most devastating Ameri-brained attitudes. Like, there are a lot of things that we talk about with respect to capitalist dogma, but like America has certain intrinsic values, right? Americans like believe in certain intrinsic values, and like one of them is that cars create independence for you, and people cannot let go of that. It's like permanently stapled to the back of their minds. Our puritanical attitude towards sex is really damaging as well. It reinforces misogyny. It reinforces patriarchal constructs. And lastly, of course, our draconian attitude towards crime and punishment. And that is also a part of the reason why America is not the most free nation on the planet. America has a quarter of the enslaved and not free population on the planet, despite making up only 4% of the overall population. So, highest prisoner per capita number here in the United States. That's pretty cool. Really wonderful stuff. All of these Ameri-brained attitudes are impossible to fucking reorient and deconstruct when people are still, even in a community like this one, trying to find reasons as to why they can't let go and they can't dream of a better future. That's the problem. Because when I say we need better public transit, I don't mean we're going to fucking come in and shoot you if you don't give up your Ford F-150 that you got from your father, okay? That's not what I'm saying at all. Obviously, you can still have a car. This would make the driving experience better too. You see what I'm saying?
Before, we're for a carbon tax.
Here's the thing. We passed this bill staring down the highest inflation rate in decades and $5 per gallon gas. There are two ways to incentivize the move toward clean energy. We can make clean energy cheaper, and we can make fossil fuels more expensive. And with people already having a hard...
This photo is fake, by the way. This is not a real photo. Cars destroyed our cities. Like, I hate to break it to you. I'm sure this went viral. Yeah, it did. It got 73,000 likes, but this isn't real. That's crazy. But, you know, when you look at 1906, like, it is wonderful. Like, this is real, and it was cool. Just the 2015 photo is fake. It's not from the same area, I don't think. It's real. Look at the account. No, this is not the same road, I don't think. To be fair, it's very clear it's not the same location, but they don't claim it to be in the same location, right? Cars are destroying our cities, though. At least designing cities around cars is. Absolutely. We have destroyed walkable cities and built car-reliant cities. It was a deliberate reason. Even Donut Media had a video on this. At this point, like, one of the greatest examples is what happened in Los Angeles, California. America built the worst possible cities you could because, you know, we associate freedom, personal choice, individuality, American exceptionalism with car ownership. That was a deliberate, propagandized effort to change our attitude. Shouts out to Henry Ford. Shouts out to the oil and gas industry. They worked in unison, collaborated, and built they built this resentment that you have, that you hold in your heart to public transit. That is the reason. This is a centuries-long effort to make you feel as though there is no better future, that there is no alternative, there's no other solution. Literally pick a random street in Europe and you will find better urbanism than the U.S. Yeah, I mean, I personally loved Amsterdam so fucking much that it unironically made me into like almost into one of those like orange pilled, incredibly annoying Dutch pilled, sock them global. I put a Taiwan flag on my Twitter account, my Twitter bio type motherfucker. Okay, it's so nice. It's so nice. It's so cool. What do you drive? I drive an electric vehicle. I drive a Porsche Taycan. But like I've said before, if there was a magic bill that was like, if Hasan throws his Porsche Taycan into the fucking bottom of the ocean, we get public transit, I would do it tomorrow. I wouldn't even think about it.
Their jobs if they intentionally made fuel costs go up. This bill is very nearly all carrots for clean energy and just a few sticks for fossil fuels. But I will talk about those sticks now because one of them I love very much. Methane is the most simple carbon-containing molecule, and it is even better at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. Over the short term, it's 80 times better at trapping heat. And as we've moved away from coal and toward natural gas, which is basically just methane, that has been good because methane is a more efficient fuel. You get more heat per carbon dioxide molecule that you release. Except that at every step of the way, methane can leak into the atmosphere. At the wellhead, at the pipeline, at the compressor, at the infrastructure that delivers it to your house, and the facilities that use it. The Methane Emissions Reduction Program provides incentives to fix leaks and acquire more advanced systems for keeping methane from being released. And it also pays for teams to check and see if there are methane leaks and charge increasingly hefty fines to the
I'm remembering a time when the Trump administration was so aggressive with its deregulation in the immediate aftermath of taking over the White House that they literally stopped any kind of like methane capture regulation, and it was so fucking devastating for the environment that it even got like car manufacturers to speak out against it. Like that was how fucked up it was. EPA had to make a rogue account. What? Shouldn't they have to fix the leaks already? How the fuck is that legal? America, baby. What do you mean? Also, it doesn't even fucking matter because what kind of regulatory mechanism do you have to ensure that these people actually follow through on methane leaks, like and fix them? There's also a racial angle behind lack of public transportation, preventing black criminals to move into the white suburbs. Yes, there is also that. Highways themselves are an adequate tool for redlining. They literally reinforce redlining and separated black suburbs that were underserved deliberately away from white suburbs.
companies that are releasing this entirely usable, potent greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Those fines go up and up and up until they generate a fairly significant amount of revenue as it forces these companies to clean up their act. The other sticks against fossil fuels are fairly minor. They reinstate the Superfund tax, which is basically a big pool of money that polluters pay into, and that money is then used to rehabilitate the damage that they do to the environment. It is a super fund. When I was a kid, I thought it was the Superfund program. It's not that. There's also an increase in the percentage of money that the government gets back from oil companies when they take oil and gas off of federal lands. And finally, there's an increase in the cost of holding a lease without developing it. So just having it sit there and not using it, there's an increase in that cost. Both of those are basically ways to disincentivize companies from using federal lands to produce oil and gas. So there are a couple of things to keep fossil fuels a little more under control, but mostly we want their cost to remain steady or even go down as demand for them decreases because the alternatives are just better. But also, weirdly, there's a couple of carrots for fossil fuels.
And I would do anything for love.
Since we are obsessed with anything and everything that makes us feel bad, if you've heard anything about this bill, you have heard that Joe Manchin, moderate Democrat, forced the inclusion of a few very weird provisions. First, and most frustratingly, he took a few oil and gas leases in Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico that Trump had authorized and then Biden had paused and people have been fighting against for years and was like, you want my name on this? You make those leases happen. It's super weird. It's super frustrating. It's outside of the normal process. No one likes this. Except for, of course, the oil and gas companies and Joe Manchin. And the other thing was basically a way to prevent any president or lawmakers in the next 10 years from banning fossil fuel leases on federal land. And it does this by tying the ability to put clean energy projects on federal land to a requirement to offer leases for oil and gas drilling on other separate federal lands.
That's
now,
awesome.
An offered lease is not a sold lease, and a sold lease is not an oil well, but it is still disappointing, kind of gets stuck in your throat, even if modelers show that the overall carbon effectiveness of the bill only goes down by about 2% because of these provisions. But Manchin, I guess, got what he wanted out of it, which is everyone talking more about how he loves fossil fuels and they're his pretty little baby than the entire rest of the bill. And also, he got to be like one of the title names on the bill, despite being one of...
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, Fango Lives. The oil, in my opinion, the oil and gas leasing won't have much effect since there are already so many leases out there going unused and many new ones are going unsold too. I've been wondering about that a lot because as we saw in this previous like massive inflation, artificial scarcity and inflation caused by OPEC and our also own domestic manufacturers, producers of oil and gas that purposely kept prices high in an effort to increase their profit margins to punish the American people and globally punish people for not purchasing oil at a time when COVID was happening and there wasn't a lot of transportation. We saw that they were not interested in increasing manufacturing regardless when they had the capacity to do so. So part of the reason why I find it really strange is that like public leasing, I feel like has to have an alternative interest. I don't know if the alternative is to like just reinstitute it for something different down the line. I don't even know if there are provisions that stop them from doing such a thing. Okay. Supply of leases increases. Demand keeps going down. Leases get cheaper, more wells. Yeah, but they're not even doing that. So that's what I don't understand. I don't know if like the reason for why they're doing it is like there has to be another reason for it. You know what I mean? Are they going to reappropriate it for something different? Can they even do that? I don't know. But that's what I've been thinking about a lot as well. Are they just purchasing federal land or have the capacity to purchase federal land for oil and gas initiatives without actually, or for wells, without actually having any interest in drilling it specifically so that doesn't go to renewable energy? Will they then create a secondary market for the growing? Will they create a secondary market for the growing renewable energy industry so that they can maintain their profit margins by reselling the leases that they now maintain back to the renewable energy industry once that becomes the main energy provider? I don't know. Give land back to the indigenous people. Maybe that's why they're buying it, so they can give it back to the indigenous people. Yeah, no, they're not doing that. That's one reason why they're not doing that. They're definitely, I can tell you that they're not doing that to do land back, okay? All I can think is either a land grab to steal land from the government or they're going to pump production when green energy takes off? Maybe. I don't know. There is tribal funding in the bill. It's something. I know. There's also $60 billion, I believe, according to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There is about $60 billion for environmental justice investments in communities disproportionately harmed by climate change and pollution. For those of you who say, oh, well, that's just lip shit. No, that's actually a desperate measure that is absolutely a necessity for survival. We have time and time again covered this aspect, the environmental justice aspect, the racist aspect of drilling, and the toxic chemicals that you release into areas that have no way to push back because they have no power, they have no voice, they are poor. Poorer neighborhoods have higher chances, a higher likelihood of developing cancer for that reason. This is money that will go directly into underserved communities that will be able to rebuild. Hawaii is a great example of this too. I mean, that was the military, but more in that. So environmental justice funds all the time, and it helps remediate areas without big money. Yeah, Louisiana, the entire fucking state, is a great example of this. I mean, everywhere in the United States of America, every reservation in the United States of America has been long dicked by energy production because they don't do it in the backyard of a fucking oil baron. They're never going to do that there because they know, hey, I don't want to fuck up my water supply. I don't want toxic pollutants everywhere. I don't want my children to grow up in an area that's called Cancer Valley, right? Yeah. I don't want my children to be playing in a fucking pond that has toxic waste dumped into it. Yeah, the poor people end up getting the short end of that stick. So it's not just minorities, Chad. It's anywhere that's poor. Exactly. But oftentimes it ends up disproportionately affecting marginalized communities, obviously.
One of its biggest opponents. So now the right question to ask is all of this going to work? And luckily, I have prepared for you more squares. Each one of these is roughly 5 million fewer tons of CO2, and by 2030, there are 200 of them. So that's roughly 1 billion fewer tons of carbon dioxide per year. Here's where we'll be. Decreased CO2 in transportation saves us 280 million tons per year. Cleaner power generation saves us 360 million tons. Cleaner industry saves us 130 million. Cleaner buildings save us around 70 million tons. Same for the equivalent carbon dioxide effects of mostly methane, but also other greenhouse gases produced by cars like nitric oxides. And finally, carbon sequestration in agricultural and forest lands gets us a final 80 million tons. And of course, we do not pause there. The effects of these changes are projected to get us down another 500 million tons by 2035. I'm aware that there are going to be people who are going to be mad at me for being pretty unapologetically excited about this bill. Like, I'm mad that we lost the Civilian Climate Corps, which would have been thousands of young people working on the ground on these problems. I am frustrated that we lost a lot of due process on these oil leases, and they weren't even something that I was actively working on, so I can't imagine what it must be like for the people who've been fighting those battles. Look, I don't know if it's that I'm old now, or that I'm privileged in like 1,000 ways, or that I've been through a number of climate fights that went very badly. Or maybe I'm just thinking practically about the fact that this might be our last chance to get something substantial done for years, like many years maybe, especially because there was every likelihood that this could.
For the record, that was, what were those blocks? Those blocks were what? 5 million tons, right? Every single one of these blocks is 5 million tons, right? I just want to point something out right now really quickly that will probably doom pill you a little bit further, even though I know Hank hates that. But here is where the vast majority of our carbon emissions come from. First and foremost, it's almost 2 billion, billion with a B, not million, 2 billion metric tons in 2017 were coming from transportation. And the vast majority of those emissions came from driving passenger vehicles. So a gigantic swath up to 1 billion tons, not million, 1 billion tons of emissions is coming directly from individual car culture. People driving around in their own vehicles when they could very easily be able to reduce traffic density and if we had adequate public transit, greatly reduce the carbon emissions that are coming from driving individual vehicles. Small price to pay for freedom, baby. That's right. Hell yeah. Each one of those rows is 100 million. That's significant. Wait, where the fuck was this? Okay. Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So yeah, this entire thing in and of itself is basically the carbon emission created by personal use cars in 1 year.
Cars like nitric oxides. And finally, carbon sequestration in agricultural and forest lands gets us a final 80 million tons. And of course, we do not pause there. The effects of these changes are projected to get us down another 500 million tons by 2035. I'm aware that there are going to be people who are going to be mad at me for being pretty unapologetically excited about this bill. Like, I'm mad that we lost the Civilian Climate Corps, which would have been thousands of young people working on the ground on these problems. I am frustrated that we lost a lot of due process.
Why do you act like you care about the environment when you talk shit about farting Teslas? Don't you own car? I do own car. Damn, bro, you fucking got me. I'm a hypocrite. Streamer man, you own car. Well, I own an electric vehicle, which I don't even think is like genuinely putting a dent in this personally. But you know, I do own an EV at least. But having said that, like I mentioned, I am perfectly happy with better public transit. Okay, that's like I've said time and time again. If there was a magic solution, I could just like fucking, you know, light my car on fire, and then tomorrow we had better public transit in Los Angeles, a better grid, I would be on board with that.
On these oil leases, and they weren't even something that I was actively working on, so I can't imagine what it must be like for the people who've been fighting those battles. Look, I don't know if it's that I'm old now, or that I'm privileged in like 1,000 ways, or that I've been through a number of climate fights that went very badly. Or maybe I'm just thinking practically about the fact that this might be our last chance to get something substantial done for years, like many years maybe, especially because there was every likelihood that this could have just not happened, like many other parts of the original Build Back Better didn't happen. In fact, 4 measly weeks ago, it seemed like it wouldn't happen. I got to talk to Jesse Jenkins about that.
Why do all your ways of getting rid of your car have to be so bad for the environment, dropping it in the ocean, lighting it on fire? Well, that's the joke. That's why.
I was on vacation with my family, or leaving for vacation, and I got the call from Senator Schumer's staff that the bill was dead. Same phases of grief, right? Shock, loss, anger. And some people stopped at anger and they just got mad at Joe Manchin on the internet and yelled at, you know, got cynical like you were talking about. And some of us, including some members of, you know, a handful of members of the Senate, again said, no, this is not how it's going to end. I refuse to accept that. So this is also bargaining, right? That's one of the phases of grief. And we went back to work and we bargained, and it, against all odds, it worked. I had pretty well given up hope that it was going to succeed at that point, given that this is the second time the rug was pulled out from under us. You know, I wanted to be able to tell my kids that we fought to the very end, and it worked. And I am so grateful. I'm gonna tear up a little for all the people really that did that, because it was very.
Are those billions of personal transportation carbon emissions including like celebrity jets? I don't think so, even though I do think that now with like our K-shaped recovery and like the wealthy getting incredibly profoundly wealthier in the aftermath of COVID, or during COVID, and the income gap widening, right? And the wage gap widening and the wealth gap widening, that disparity has created a system where like a lot of celebrities are basically just fucking chartering private jets and shit. But even that in and of itself does not fucking put a dent in the carbon emissions caused by a disgusting, abhorrent industry that should not exist. I am, of course, talking about, and some of you already know this, cruise ships, okay? If there was an opportunity to take every cruise ship and just fucking nuke them into space, I would do it. I would put all the Republicans in it first, but then I would also fucking, you know, and all the executives of cruise ships, and I would just fly them out to space. No reason for it. Absolutely makes no sense. It is it's just disgusting. One cruise ship causes as much carbon emissions as the entire continent of fucking Europe and its cars, okay? That's insane. The fact that it still exists, the fact that this industry has to exist is mind-boggling to me, okay? Mind-boggling. You are shipping it with whom? Yeah, it's just like, not true, that stat is misquoted. Right, really? I thought it was, well, regardless, it still is a fuckload, okay? It is a boatload. It is a ton of toxic pollutants. It's a ton of fucking... It should not have existed. In the aftermath of COVID, we had an opportunity to just fucking finally strike the end blow into cruise ships. which are also, you know, the greatest way to transmit diseases globally. It's awesome. It's great. I think it's 1 million cars, not the entirety of EU. Okay, well, you know. Your demented grandparents can be made to believe that they're on a cruise ship on land, okay? They don't need to do syphilis parties on the fucking cruise ship. They can do it in Florida, which is kind of like one big cruise ship. Just let them do it in Florida. Why do they have to be on a cruise ship? Make it feel for them like they are on a fucking cruise ship. It's easy. They have dementia anyway, okay? They don't know any better. Be like, yeah, grandma, you're going on a boat. It's going to be so much fun, okay? No, let them do it. And then the boat is Florida, okay? And then what we can do is take every Filipino, which is like, you know, 98% of the cruise ship industry is exploited Filipino workers. We turn them into the Maoist brigade. And then the Philippines become a Maoist nation, a Maoist third worldist nation. Okay, Pinoy gang. One mid-sized cruise ship has the emission of 1 million cars is still a literal fuck ton. Yeah, like I shit on cars a lot, but remember that like 1 million cars still has practical utility, whereas cruise ships do not.
Very close to failure.
I don't harbor any illusions that I live in a perfect world or a perfect country or that perfect legislation exists. There are 330 million of us. The fact that we get anything done at all is a little impressive. And over the last 10 years, we have made tremendous strides in cutting carbon emissions, and that has been in large part because of government investment in the US and elsewhere. Between 2009 and 2017, America spent around $20 billion per year fighting climate change. Over the next 10 years, we will spend $80 billion per year. There are a lot of super powerful people who have been working really hard this whole time to slow this down as much as they can. At first, they say it doesn't exist. Then they say it's not caused by people. Then they say it's caused by people, but it's not that big of a deal. Then they say it's that big of a deal, but the costs to take it on are too great. We have hit them with reality at every step in that process, and we are going to hit them with reality at this step of the process too. They will tell us that the costs are too great, and after we prove to them that it's not, they will tell us that it's too late. Nothing gets done if you don't believe it can't be done. And I, for the first time in decades of this, have started to believe that it can be done. And it's happening, I think, for two reasons. One, because of the very hard work of a lot of people, from policy to science to communication and outreach. And two, because it is getting hard to ignore the very real effects of all of this extra energy in our atmosphere and in our oceans. We might be in a very narrow window here, a moment when the effects are too present for anyone to ignore anymore, but not so present that they will hold us back from implementing solutions. I don't know how long that window is going to be open, and I was not sure that it was open until somebody did something and said something, and they kept working, and they kept pushing, and they kept making the case that this needed to be done until it got done. But now it feels like the window's open. It does not feel like we are done. One big step does not get you over the mountain pass. There is much more to do, but as I've been saying, I am more optimistic now that this is a challenge that we can actually take on than I have been maybe in my entire career. John, I'll see you on Tuesday. Heads up.
I can't stand this lib propaganda. There's literally kids in chat falling for it. I mean, he's not wrong, okay? There are two different ways to look at this, okay? He recognizes that it's inadequate, right? He's just a little bit more positive about it. And obviously, when you are living in a reality where like good things seem unimaginable, even if you have like a minor minor push in the right direction, I think people are going to make a bigger deal out of that.